Rev up your engines!
F13 says, Scotty, what do you think of the 99 Mercedes-Benz G500 Cabriolet? Were they still reliable at that time? Well, they were when they were new, but realize you're talking about a 21-year-old Mercedes with a V8 engine. And those are all money pits as they age. The parts cost a fortune. The rubber starts to deteriorate. The plastic starts to deteriorate. They're just endless money pits. Now, every once in a while, it's a convertible, so a lot of people like convertibles. I get a customer once in a while that'll buy one cheap, and it's a weekend toy. I got one guy, and he bought one, and he takes his girlfriend out with it on weekends, and he just stores it in the garage the rest of the week. And I think last year he put, 2,000 miles on it or something. And you want to gamble with dynamite? What the heck? Maybe it'd be a cheap, fun toy. They're not a reliable thing you can drive every day when they're that old with a Mercedes V8 engine. They're just endless money pits. Plus, realize, old thing like that with V8, they're gas hogs. You're going to spend a fortune in gasoline if you do drive it every day for thousands and thousands and thousands of miles. It's not a smart thing to get as an everyday driver. Anthony Hatfield said, what do you think about old used Bentleys? Found a 1988 Bentley Brooklyn's 40,000 miles for 12 grand. Are the older ones simpler to work on? It's not simple. Realize that those are all endless money pit cars to begin with. They're English cars. Rolls-Royce, Bentley, they made a lot of crap. Their stuff just fell apart. I remember reading back in those days that some guy won a Rolls-Royce in some contest, and when he was taking it through a car wash, the whole exhaust system fell off on the ground. It was so poorly made. Now, if you really want one of those, have a mechanic like me at least road test it and check it out to see what kind of shape the thing is in. And if it isn't completely falling apart and you want a weekend toy and you got 12 grand you can throw away, go ahead. But realize you can't buy a car like that and drive it every day, 15, 20,000 miles a year. It will bankrupt you. Plus, getting parts for a Bentley if you're in the United States, whoo-wee. And I'm assuming you aren't in England because you wouldn't have said $12,000. You would have said pounds. So just realize it's a toy. If you want to spend that much money on a toy and a guy says it's okay, go ahead, but keep it as a toy. They are money pits. There's no arguing that. 72 Nova says, what causes vapor lock in a car? Very good question. Vapor lock is when the gas somehow between the gas tank and your engine is vaporizing inside the fuel line. Then the pumps that are in your car are made to pump liquids. Now, when I was a kid, that would happen a lot because what they had was you had a gas tank in the back and then you just had a line that went to the front. And the bottom of the engine was a mechanical fuel pump that every time the engine spun would go pump, 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 like one of those old water pumps, right? So the line got too hot. The line would vaporize. And when that vapor got to that mechanical pump, it can't pump it, you get a vapor lock and the car wouldn't run. Modern cars, it's virtually impossible to get a vapor lock in because the pump is inside the gas tank. It's soaked in liquid gasoline. It can't get any vapor in there unless you run out of gasoline. And then you got a problem, there's no gas in the tank, and that's why it's not working. So modern cars, that's not something you really have to worry about. But the old ones would because they had a mechanical pump. And even if they had an electric pump, in the front, it get hot enough under the hood, the heat of the engine, that before that electric pump, if that gas vaporized in the line, the pump would get it and it'd stop pumping. But almost all cars now have the fuel pump in the gas tank, so they can't get vapor locked because they're pumping liquid the whole time. The whole clue of that is vapor. A pump can't pump vapor. It can only pump liquid, at least the ones that are in cars. John says, I'm following you from an Afghan cave. Which armored car is good? Well, you got pretty good wireless going on there. If you can send me a message from Afghanistan, My son had 2 tours of duty there. Guys that want armored cars, you're pretty much getting a good diesel and have that done because it's going to have an awful lot of weight in it, and the diesel engine has more torque, so it can pull that heavy weight around. So you'd want something that was diesel power that can pull all that weight because a true armored car is going to weigh a ton. That was the problem with tanks in World War II. The Germans were making these huge tanks, but they weighed so much and they'd put the biggest engines they could find in them that came out of airplanes, and they still could only go like 8 miles an hour, the big giant ones. So you'd have to have a big, strong diesel engine if you want an armored car. Josh B says, I have my first winter car with a car on painted rims. Is it better to run steel rims with my snow tires? It's such a pain swapping them. They'll just get plain steel tires for the winter and then put their good tires on in the summer because the salt's going to destroy your fancy rims over time. If you live up north where they throw a lot of the salt on the roads and stuff like that, you don't want that to happen. You're probably better go to a junkyard or something and buy plain old steel rims and put your snow tires on it, and if you want, put fancy hubcaps on them so they look better or whatever. It's a lot easier already having your snow tires on separate rims, and then you can just store them in your garage and then put them on in the winter yourself instead of having to pay people to mount them, dismount them, rebalance them, and all that stuff. It's a lot of work. George Wilson says, I got an 03 Ford Escape. The alternator keeps going up. One, where are you buying the alternators? If you're buying the cheapest rebuilds you can get that were rebuilt in Mexico or China, that's half your problem. Now, if it's not the alternator itself, it's that it's being strained. You want to have the battery load tested. A weak battery will eat up alternators. And the wiring. Wires have to be clean. The connectors have to be clean, bolted on tight, and any plug-in connector has to be perfectly clean, because if there's corrosion on any of the electrical wiring where they either bolt on or snap in, that creates resistance. The more resistance you have, that builds up heat. That heat, what do you think it does? The heat shorts out the alternator because it's working too hard and it's making it heat up itself and burn things out. So unless you're buying the cheapest alternator you can get your hands on, you got a wiring short somewhere, and that's typical, especially on those Fords. A lot of times I tell people just change both battery cable assemblies, and it usually goes away because Fords are notorious as they age that the internal parts of the battery cable start shorting out and start having problems. I see that all the time. Kramer has knowledge, says, any advice for door ding repairs? Thanks, Scotty. You know, you could try it yourself, but I tried and I gave up. I do not have the patience to Job to do that stuff. There are guys out there, they're called paintless dent removers. I got a video on it. You can watch it on YouTube. Guy did one heck of a job taking these dings out of my wife's fender when somebody bashed into it in the parking lot. But he spent 2.5 hours doing it. I would not have the patience. They got special little tools, these paintless dent remover guys. And they hit him. He had a heat lamp, and then he had a giant mirror that had graduated scales so he could see when the lines were straight. And like I say, 2.5 hours to take those things out, and it looked beautiful. But ironically enough, then somebody smashed into the same fender 2 years later in a Walmart parking lot and destroyed the whole thing. And I took it to my body shop, and he had to put a whole fender on and paint it. So irony abounds here. Tim D says, you've been a mechanic since you were 10 years old? No, I've been a mechanic since I was 14 years old. They didn't have child labor laws. I've been working on cars since when I was 14. I started working at my father's gas station with my grandfather on weekends. My grandfather was a mechanic, so I learned how to fix cars from him. He was one of the few mechanics that would work on Saturdays and Sundays where nobody else did, and went to the racetrack. He liked betting on the ponies. He liked horse track racing. So 14. I didn't start when I was 10. I was messing around with stuff when I was 10. I'd take things apart, put them back together again. They didn't often work then. But once I learned from my grandfather, then I could take them apart and put them together and they'd still work. Accord SB says, I got a friend who has an 02 Acura TL 3.2 with 269,000 kilometers. He hasn't driven until Sunday. White smoke comes from the exhaust and he smells gas. Check engine lights on. They're notorious when they get that age of blowing head gaskets. So the first thing you want to do, how to tell if your head gasket is blowing. If you don't want to pay a mechanic, the little test tube testing kit, you can get them on Amazon for like $30. Simple test to do. When the engine's cold, you just take the radiator cap off, put the test tube on, pour a little of the blue fluid so it's like about a third of the way there's a line. Start the car. If the blue turns to yellow, you got a blown head gasket. You might not want to fix it. Fixing a head gasket on one of those V6 engines is going to hit you back anywhere from $1,500 to $3,500 or even more if there's real serious engine damage inside. So most guys don't want to do it. Now pray that test is negative. Let's say the test's negative. You don't have a blown head gasket. Then check for like a leaking fuel injector, because if a fuel injector leaks too much fuel, you're going to get white smoke because there's too much fuel and the white smoke comes out from too much fuel getting in the exhaust. Pray it's that and that it's not a blown head gasket, but you got to do the blown head gasket test first because it's simple. It tells you right off the bat. Then, do you want to spend a bunch of money, you just get rid of it. Peanut Head Seagull says, code PO172, fuel system rich on the 2010 Chevy Malibu 2.4 flex fuel. What could be the problem? I know those things inside out because they're always breaking. So I'm always working on them. They often have a problem. The high pressure fuel pump, they're leaking and fuel gets in. Check that first. That's a known flaw. I don't know if they recalled it for your model. Some of the models they actually had to recall. They were so bad. That's almost always it, the high pressure fuel pump. But any kind of fuel leak can do that. You could have a fuel injector that's starting to leak. You could have a sensor that's wrong, that's giving wrong data to the computer, so then it sprays too much gas in. But from my experience with those, it's almost always a high pressure fuel pump because it puts out so much pressure. And they built them poorly on the GM product. What a surprise, GM making something poorly. I see that so much, it makes my head spin. That's why I'd never drive one these days myself. I don't even rent them. When I rent cars, I said, no, I don't want a GM product. I said, I'll take a Kia. They usually work okay, or, even a Nissan, but not a GM product. I don't trust them. Strand you by the side of the road, even when they're late model ones at a car rental place. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.